Have you ever wondered what happens when the loneliest man in a hospital meets the most sheltered woman in the city? This isn't just a story about a doctor and his patient. It's about how two broken hearts found the courage to heal each other in ways they never imagined. Stay with me till the end, because you'll see how a single act of gentle kindness can change someone's entire world, and maybe yours too. The morning sun poured gold across the marble floors of Hawthorne Cardiac Center, the most renowned heart institute on the West Coast. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered an endless view of the Pacific, while soft classical music drifted through hidden speakers. Dr. Ethan Hawthorne, at just 36, was one of America's youngest, most celebrated cardiac surgeons. The Hawthorne family name opened doors, but Ethan's reputation was built on relentless dedication and surgical brilliance. With his dark hair neatly combed and gray eyes that saw every detail, Ethan commanded any room he entered. Yet behind those eyes hid a truth. He was lonely in a world that demanded perfection. His days were filled with life-saving surgeries and cold board meetings. His nights spent in a penthouse, so spotless it felt more like a hotel than a home. That morning, Ethan sat in his corner office, the ocean view behind him, reviewing a stack of patient files. His personal assistant, Mrs. Nguyen, knocked softly before entering. "Dr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice careful. "Your next patient is here, Miss Lily Bennett, 23 years old. Referral from Dr. Carter." Ethan barely looked up. Another routine consult, he assumed. Chest pains, family history tests. It was always the same. "Send her in," he murmured, eyes still on the tablet. But when the door opened, Ethan sensed it before he saw her. A shift in the air, a softness that made him glance up and stop. Standing there was the most delicate young woman he'd ever seen. Lily Bennett looked like she'd been plucked straight from a forgotten garden. Soft auburn hair spilled around her shoulders. She clutched an old-fashioned handbag like it was her armor. She wore a pale floral dress that floated around her fragile frame, and her eyes, wide blue-gray, filled with questions she seemed too afraid to ask. Her posture made Ethan's chest tighten. She stood slightly hunched, like she wanted to disappear into the walls. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet he had to lean forward. "My heart feels like it's racing all the time, and I can't breathe when I'm around people." Ethan watched her hands tremble on the strap of her bag. "Family history?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "I don't know. My parents died when I was little. My aunt raised me. She's always been protective." Protective. The word carried weight. When Ethan asked her to remove her cardigan so he could listen to her heart, her reaction wasn't normal anxiety. She shrank away as if he'd asked to open her chest right there. I can't," Lily whispered. "I've never been. I mean, no man's ever touched me." For the first time in years, something inside Ethan cracked open. He saw what others probably missed. This wasn't just about palpitations. This was about a lifetime spent hiding. A girl who'd been told the world was too dangerous, people too cruel. "Would you feel safer if I explained everything before I do it?" Ethan asked. "You can stop me anytime." She nodded, a tremulous bravery glinting in her eyes. He demonstrated exactly where the cold stethoscope would go. When he finally placed it against her collarbone, carefully, over the fabric, he felt her entire body tense. Her heart was a wild bird, beating against invisible bars. "It's working hard," Ethan said, "but I think this is more about anxiety than your heart itself." Lily's eyes glistened. "But I don't know how to fix it." "You don't need fixing," he said, voice low. "You just need to feel safe." When she looked up at him fully, something passed between them. Two lonely people seeing each other for the first time. "Would you come back?" Ethan asked. "Not just for your heart, but because I want to help you feel safe in your own skin." Lily hesitated, and then, in a voice like a spring breeze, "Yes." What Ethan didn't know was that that single yes would shatter the walls around both their hearts. In the next part, you'll see how a rooftop garden, a handful of fragile flowers, and a quiet promise would change the meaning of love for two people who'd almost forgotten what hope felt like. 3 days passed since that first fragile yes. Ethan Hawthorne found himself thinking about Lily Bennett at odd hours, in between surgeries, in the middle of boardroom debates, alone in his car late at night when the only sound was the ocean beating against the cliffs below his penthouse. He knew this crossed the line of professional detachment, but for the first time in years, he didn't care. He scheduled her follow-up appointment in the late afternoon, when the hospital corridors were quieter. He told himself it was for her comfort, but maybe it was also because he wanted her all to himself, without the sterile hum of a busy clinic. When Mrs. Nguyen knocked and announced, "Miss Bennett is here," Ethan felt something he hadn't felt since he was a young resident: anticipation. Lily stepped into his office like she was stepping into a cathedral. She wore a soft lavender sweater that matched the shade of her eyes, a color that had haunted Ethan's thoughts every night since they met. He didn't lead her to the cold exam table this time. Instead, he gestured to two comfortable armchairs by the window, where the late sun turned the ocean into liquid gold. "How have you been feeling?" he asked, keeping his tone gentle. Lily sat down slowly, folding her hands in her lap. "Better. A little. I've been doing the breathing exercises you showed me." Ethan smiled, a real, warm smile that softened the sharp angles of his face. "That's good, Lily. That's really good." She looked at him, eyes flicking away shyly. "You said you wanted to help me feel safe. How?" Ethan leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "I want to show you a place. Somewhere here in the hospital, but not here." He gestured around the room. "Somewhere quiet. Would you trust me to take you there?" She hesitated, but then she nodded, just once, small but brave. He offered his hand. She stared at it as if it were a snake, then, with a tiny breath, placed her delicate fingers in his. Ethan felt the tremor travel from her skin into his chest. They walked in silence through the empty corridors. Nurses looked up, puzzled to see their infamously stoic surgeon escorting a fragile girl through staff-only doors. When they stepped onto the rooftop, the world changed. Above the sterile floors of the Hawthorne Cardiac Center was a hidden garden, Ethan's secret retreat. Ivy climbed the walls, roses spilled over trellises, and the sunset bathed everything in gold. Here, the city's noise melted into the hush of distant waves. Lily stepped forward, breath catching. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ethan watched her eyes widen. It was the first time he'd seen her face fully relaxed, the fear replaced by wonder. He gestured to a bench among the flowers. "Come, sit." As they settled on the weathered bench, Lily's fingers brushed a cluster of white roses. "These are David Austin," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You know your flowers." She nodded shyly. "My aunt's shop, Bennett Blossoms, specializes in rare flowers. I've worked there since I was 16. She told him about the early mornings arranging bouquets, the smell of damp soil, the quiet moments before the shop opened. As she spoke, Ethan noticed how the tension melted from her shoulders, her voice growing clearer. "You light up when you talk about this," he said softly. Lily looked away, embarrassed. "Flowers don't judge me. They don't ask questions." "You don't have to hide among flowers anymore," Ethan said. "You deserve to be seen." They sat there as the sun sank, talking about small things, her favorite flowers, his childhood memories of helping his mother plant herbs behind their mansion before the Hawthorne name felt like a chain. When Lily shivered in the evening breeze, Ethan shrugged off his tailored jacket and draped it around her shoulders. She looked at him, startled by the warmth, and for a heartbeat he thought she might lean in. But she pulled back, tucking her hair behind her ear. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked. Her voice was so soft it nearly broke him. He reached for her hand again, slow, so she could pull away. She didn't. "Because," Ethan said, his voice rougher than he expected, "I think there's more strength in you than you know. And because," he hesitated, his pulse hammering, "because I haven't wanted to help someone, really help someone, in a long time." Lily blinked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm scared," she admitted. Ethan's thumb brushed over her knuckles. "So am I. In the next part, you'll see how that hidden garden becomes their safe place. How a simple invitation to visit her world, her flower shop, will push both of them to face the shadows they've kept buried for too long. And how what started as a doctor's promise slowly becomes something far more dangerous. Something called love." A week after their secret rooftop moment, Ethan Hawthorne found himself standing in front of a storefront he'd never noticed before. Bennett Blossoms, tucked away on a quiet corner of the city's old district. Through the glass, he could see Lily moving among the blooms. Her movements were calm and precise, like a dancer who belonged to the music only she could hear. She wore a pale yellow dress with an apron tied at her waist, her hair pulled into a loose bun, with stray curls framing her face. Ethan's heart did something it had never done before. It stumbled. This wasn't the fragile girl from his exam room. This was someone in her element, surrounded by color and fragrance and life. The little brass bell above the door jingled when he pushed it open. Lily looked up, startled. Then she froze, a small white lily in her hands, its petals brushing her cheek. "Dr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice aflutter. "Ethan," he corrected gently. "Here, I'm just me." Lily's eyes dropped to the flowers on the counter. "What are you doing here?" He looked around the shop, overflowing with roses, orchids, wildflowers in glass jars, and hanging ferns that kissed the ceiling beams. It was like stepping into a dream. "I thought my office could use something real," he said, slipping his hands into his coat pockets to stop himself from reaching for her. "And I wanted to see you." Her breath caught. She tried to hide it by fussing with a vase. "My aunt's in the back," she whispered, as if sharing a secret. "She'll be curious." "I'll be on my best behavior," Ethan said with a playful tilt of his lips, a smile that made Lily's pulse skip. A moment later, a woman appeared from the back, tall, silver hair swept into a bun, eyes sharp as a hawk's. She carried a clipboard and an air of fierce protectiveness. "Lily," she called, then saw Ethan standing by the display of white peonies. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "I see we have distinguished company. Aunt Margaret, this is Dr. Hawthorne," Lily stammered. "He's here for flowers." Ethan stepped forward, extending his hand with a calm confidence that rarely failed him in boardrooms and operating rooms alike. "Ethan Hawthorne. I'm one of Lily's doctors." Margaret's eyes flicked from his tailored coat to Lily's flushed cheeks. Her lips pursed, but she took his hand. "Is that so?" Lily's fingers fiddled with the hem of her apron. "He wants something for his office." Margaret's eyes never left his. "Do you? Or are you here to poke around my niece's business?" "A bit of both," Ethan said honestly, surprising even himself. "I wanted to see where she feels safe." That made Margaret's eyes soften, just a fraction. "Then you'd better let her pick for you. She's the best we've got." As the older woman moved to help another customer, Lily turned back to Ethan, cheeks pink. "You didn't have to come here." "I did," he said simply. She swallowed, her eyes glancing down. What would you like? Ethan leaned on the counter, closing the distance between them. What would you choose for someone who lives in a place that's all steel and glass? Who forgets to stop and breathe sometimes? Lily's lips twitched into the faintest smile. I'd pick something that makes you remember you're alive. Show me, he said. She led him through the tiny jungle of flowers, pointing out orchids with petals like ink spills, tiny wildflowers she'd grown from seeds in the shop's greenhouse, a single blue hydrangea that looked like it held a piece of the sky. He listened, captivated by how her voice changed when she spoke about roots and soil and sunlight, how her entire body seemed to breathe easier. Finally, she wrapped an arrangement herself, simple white orchids, sprigs of fresh greenery, and a single stem of lilac. She tied it with twine, her fingers nimble, her eyes flicking up to meet his every now and then. When he paid, their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. Thank you, Ethan said softly, for letting me see this part of you. She glanced down at the flowers, then up at him again, her lashes trembling. It's not much. It's everything, he said. Margaret watched from behind the counter, arms crossed, eyes sharper than any scalpel in Ethan's operating room. But Lily didn't seem to care. For the first time, Ethan saw a spark of something in her eyes, a flicker of trust, maybe even courage. That night, Ethan placed the flowers in his glass office. The white petals glowed in the cold fluorescent light like a tiny rebellion, life among the sterility. He sat at his desk, the city lights flickering far below. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. He felt the ghost of Lily's small, trembling hand in his. He remembered her eyes when she talked about things that bloomed, things that could break through the soil and reach for the sun. He wanted to help her do the same. He wanted to see her bloom. And maybe he wanted to bloom too. Next, they'll face the biggest test yet. A dinner invitation that takes Lily out of her safe world and into Ethan's private one. A night when fears will tremble, secrets will surface, and two lonely souls will finally see what it means to be touched, body and heart. Don't miss it. It had been 2 weeks since Ethan visited Bennett Blossoms. 2 weeks of short texts, checking on her breathing exercises, reminding her to drink tea when her chest felt tight, sharing photos of the orchids she'd picked out now blooming on his windowsill. But tonight was different. Tonight, Ethan stood in the kitchen of his oceanfront penthouse, sleeves rolled to his elbows, chopping fresh herbs like an amateur chef. His heart, the one that always stayed so calm during surgeries, now hammered against his ribs like an eager drum. When Lily knocked softly, he felt his breath catch. He opened the door to find her standing there in a simple soft blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, eyes wide with wonder at the glittering city behind him. "Hi," she said, her voice trembling. "I hope I'm not too early." "You're perfect," Ethan said, then froze. He never used words like that. But with her, honesty always seemed to slip out, raw and unfiltered. She stepped inside, her eyes sweeping over the tall windows, the ocean shimmering in the moonlight. "It's like living in the sky." Ethan smiled, offering her a glass of water. "I don't spend much time here, honestly. Feels too big sometimes." "Too big," Lily said, blinking at him. "But you're you." He leaned against the counter. "What does that mean?" "You're Dr. Hawthorne. Everyone talks about you like you're untouchable." "Maybe that's why I wanted you here," he said quietly, "so you could see I'm not." She sat on a tall stool, watching him cook. It was so normal, so ordinary, yet the air between them pulsed with something fragile and electric. They ate pasta by candlelight, the city lights winking like stars beyond the glass. Conversation drifted from small things, favorite flowers, childhood memories, to the things they'd never dared say out loud. I spent so many years thinking if I stayed invisible, I'd be safe, Lily confessed. If no one saw me, no one could hurt me. Ethan's chest tightened. But invisible people get lonely too. She nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. What about you? You save lives every day. You're never alone. He let out a soft, humorless laugh. Being surrounded by people isn't the same as being known, Lily. Their eyes locked, the candle's flame dancing in the reflection. After dinner, they stood by the window, the city's heartbeat echoing beneath them. Ethan's hand hovered near hers, not quite touching. He felt her breath, shallow but steady. "Why did you really invite me here?" she asked, her voice a trembling thread. Ethan swallowed hard. "Because I wanted you to see my world. And because I want you to know that you're not the only one who's scared." Lily turned to him, her eyes wide. "Are you scared now?" He nodded. "Terrified." She laughed, a tiny, unexpected sound. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she reached up and placed her palm against his chest. She felt the solid beat beneath her fingers, strong, steady, real. "It's so strange," she whispered. "I came to you because my heart wouldn't stop racing. But now it feels calm." Ethan's hand covered hers, holding it there. "You make mine race." Neither of them spoke as he lowered his head, his lips hovering just above hers, asking, not taking. Lily's breath caught. She felt her entire body tremble, but this time she didn't pull away. When his mouth finally met hers, it was soft, gentle, a question answered with a sigh. Her fingers curled into his shirt, his arms wrapped around her like a promise. He pulled back just an inch. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. "Don't," she breathed. And for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. They moved to his bedroom, a place that once felt like a museum piece, all glass and minimalism. But tonight, it felt warm, alive. Ethan moved slowly, every touch a prayer. He let Lily set the pace, unbuttoning his shirt with trembling fingers, gasping softly as he kissed the curve of her neck. "You're safe," he murmured against her skin. "Always." When they finally lay together, it wasn't about the act. It was about the trust, the surrender, the miracle of two guarded hearts daring to open for each other. Lily's soft cries filled the room, not with fear, but with wonder. Ethan held her close, pressing kisses to her damp forehead, her cheeks, her lips. When it was over, they lay tangled in the sheets, breathless but calm, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing circles on her bare shoulder. "I never knew," Lily said sleepily. "Never knew it could feel like this." Ethan pressed his lips to her hair. "Like what?" "Like blooming," she whispered. And in the dark, Ethan smiled, because that was exactly what it felt like. 6 months later, the old greenhouse behind Bennett Blossoms buzzed with life in a way it hadn't in years. Sunlight spilled through its glass panes, casting dappled patterns on rows of rare orchids, delicate roses, and seedlings in terracotta pots, tiny promises waiting to bloom. In the middle of it all, Lily Bennett knelt on a low wooden bench, her hair pulled back, her hands deep in rich, fragrant soil. There was dirt on her cheeks, a smudge on her nose, but her eyes shone with a quiet, radiant joy. Behind her, leaning against the doorframe, was Ethan Hawthorne, no tie, no lab coat, just a man whose heart had finally found its home. They'd faced their share of questions in those first months. Some colleagues whispered that the brilliant surgeon had lost his edge, too distracted by a girl who once trembled to be seen. But Ethan knew better. He hadn't lost his edge. He'd gained something far sharper, a reason to breathe, to fight, to truly live. Every surgery felt more meaningful now. Every patient, every heartbeat, reminded him of that day he'd listened to Lily's trembling pulse and realized he was listening to his own too. They built the greenhouse together, piece by piece. Ethan handled the permits, the funding, the long phone calls Lily dreaded. She picked the seeds, tended the fragile sprouts, coaxed them to life with the same gentleness Ethan once gave her. And in the evenings, when the sun dipped below the ocean and the flowers closed their petals, they'd sit on the old bench beneath a canopy of trailing vines, hands intertwined, heads resting on each other's shoulders. "I used to dream of this," Lily whispered once, watching the moonlight dance on the glass panes. "This greenhouse?" Ethan asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "No," she said, smiling up at him. "This, being brave enough to want something for myself, and to let someone want me back." One crisp evening, as the orchids bloomed in pale shades of violet and white, Ethan dropped to one knee right there in the dirt. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Not a family heirloom, not some fancy diamond. Just a simple ring he'd chosen himself, because it felt like her. "Lily Bennett," he said, his voice trembling for the first time since that rooftop garden months ago. "Will you grow old with me? Will you be my safe place, the home my heart always looked for?" Lily's hands flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes, but there was no fear in them, only joy. "Yes," she whispered, her voice steady now. "Yes, always." As they held each other surrounded by blooms, they both understood the truth they wished everyone could know. Sometimes the strongest hearts are the ones that tremble. Sometimes the loneliest souls are the ones that teach you how to feel alive. And sometimes the love you never knew how to ask for comes quietly, in the touch of a trembling hand, the kindness of a patient voice, the courage to let someone see you fully. Ethan and Lily didn't just heal each other. They learned that life is not about being flawless or fearless. It's about finding that one person who makes your fears worth facing, your heart worth trusting, and your dreams worth planting. So, if you've ever felt like your heart beats too fast, like it races ahead of your courage, remember Lily and Ethan's story. Remember that blooming takes time, and that love, real love, is patient enough to wait for you to open, petal by petal, at your own pace. Moral of the story: sometimes the most fragile hearts create the strongest roots. Sometimes the ones who feel invisible hold the power to make someone feel seen. And sometimes you don't just find love, you grow it together. If this story touched your heart, imagine what's waiting for you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment about the moment that made you tear up, and watch our next video. We'll tell you about a love that bloomed from a simple promise in an old library. Until then, keep blooming, and never be afraid to let your heart tremble.